I have to deal with this now, my Powell identification in the Martin film. This is a graphic I've used in a couple of my videos, and where I say on there, somebody thinks this might be James Powell. Now, that was my memory. That's why I wrote it that way. I did not identify this as James Powell, but my memory told me that somebody had. I think now this is kind of a comedy of errors. I think actually I'm remembering somebody identifying this as Phil Willis. And that it wasn't a memory of mine, that I just created this because I don't want to explain the theory because this has to be less than a 15-minute video, but it fits so very well with my theory of James Powell and what happened on that day, that I think my memory might have made that into misremembering who somebody had identified this as. My Powell theory does not depend upon this identification, but this would be a very nice corroboration if it was Powell. And I was forced to deal with this because recently the JFK Theorist posted a video in which he debunked this identification by presenting this graphic here, showing a known photograph of Phil Willis on the left, and using the image from the Martin film on the right, and comparing the two. And there is a striking resemblance here, of course, at the hairline, the fact that he's wearing glasses, and we know that Willis had a camera in Dealey Plaza, and we know he was there in Dealey Plaza on the day of the assassination. All of that is great evidence, I think, to support this identification as being Phil Willis and not James Powell. And in the comments section under that JFK Theorist video, Denis Moreisette was trying to provide a link to a video which showed Powell in Dealey Plaza, and for some reason that link wasn't appearing. But in this comment he says, "I'm writing this for a fourth time. After you see WFAA in the link I've posted, check out the man on the left doing 360 degrees. That's Powell with his camera, confirmed to me by his wife." Although that link did not work, I am familiar with a website. This website here, JFK Assassination Photos and Films blog, which I have come to believe is Denis Moreisette's website, even though I don't see it identified as such on the website itself. An excellent website, very thorough, where people are identified. Here it's photographers, our amateur cameramen are identified in Dealey Plaza in the photography. And on this website is that same graphic, almost exactly the same graphic that the JFK Theorist used, where it compares a known photo of Phil Willis to this man in the Martin film and declares him to be Phil Willis, not James Powell, of course. And I think this probably is the source of my false memory. That is, I remembered this person in the Martin film being identified as somebody, and I thought it was Powell. But I think probably this was the origin of my memory, where that person was identified as Willis. And as I said already, I think that's a good-looking identification, when considering that perhaps these are not exactly the same time period. That is, to me, the guy on the left, Phil Willis, looks like he's probably a little older and a little fatter than the guy on the right in the Martin film. But still, they look very similar, and I would accept that identification. But then I put the two together. That is, on the left we have this web page that I think is Denis Moreisette's web page, though I'm not certain of that. On the left is that, and on the right is the graphic used by the JFK Theorist. And there is a slight difference in the graphic. for whatever reason on that web page, blacked out is the information under the Willis photo. And it's hard to read, but it looks like it says Major Phil Willis, and then something can't be read because of the yellow boxing there. But then underneath that it says around 1963, courtesy of the state of Phil Willis. So if that is accurate, that is, if the picture on the left of Phil Willis is around 1963, then we're not talking about a man who is significantly older than the person in the Martin film. And that caused me to look a little more closely at this. And the ear on Phil Willis, in the photo on the left, looks to be much larger than the ear of the man in the Martin film, though you can't be certain about that because the quality of the Martin film is not really very good here. But it's enough to make me wonder whether it really is Phil Willis in the Martin film. And of course, what we also have circled here is apparently Phil Willis, when he wore his Sunday clothes or whatever, would wear his pins. I don't know what they are. Presumably they're military pins, and a handkerchief in his pocket. It's not very uncommon that a man will wear a handkerchief in his pocket in this situation, or at least back then when people dressed up, they would do things like that. And we don't. Of course, the picture of Phil Willis is not on the day of the assassination, so we shouldn't expect that his attire would necessarily match the guy in Dealey Plaza if it was Phil Willis. But I have doubts now that that is Phil Willis. I'm not sure about that. And I also have doubts about whoever made this web page, because why the devil would you black out the information there where it says this is Willis around 1963? Why would you black that out? It seems like that's relevant information, the time of the photo, if you're comparing it to another photo, because people do change as they age. So I'm having doubts about whoever's webpage this is, and I think it's Denis Moreisette's webpage. And I'm also curious as to where the JFK Theorist got this graphic. Obviously, it comes from the same source as the graphic on the webpage. And I think it's Denis Moreisette's webpage, and Denis Moreisette is a regular commenter on the JFK's Theorist's videos. So I think he probably got the graphic from Denis Moreisette, though he did not say where he got it. But that would be interesting if the subject were Denis Moreisette. But it's not. The subject here is James Powell and Phil Willis. Now, also on this website, under Powell, not under Willis, we have an identification of Powell in that film that Denis Moreisette was trying to link to. This film is actually hosted, or this video that is actually posted on YouTube, or hosted on YouTube, but it's linked to through this webpage. And there is an arrow pointing to the man identified as James Powell. And this here is the first frame of that film clip. And this is the man that the web page identifies as Powell at the beginning of the film clip. And he does seem to have a camera there, which at the beginning, he's looking at it, setting it or something, apparently. And then he does a 180 is what he does, not a 360. And there we see him turn around again. And then when the film clip ends, he brings his camera up a little bit and looks at it again. So we don't see him taking any pictures here, but it does look as though he has a camera. And we should keep in mind, I think, that Powell said he took one photo in Dealey Plaza, and that's the Powell photo that we all know about. And so why he's fiddling around with his camera, I don't know, because apparently he didn't take any photographs with it after that only one. So this is the man that Denis Moreisette is talking about, the man he identifies as Powell. As he says in this comment here, after you see WFAA in the link I've just posted, check out the man on the left doing a 180 degrees. That's Powell with his camera, confirmed to me by his wife. So apparently Denis Moreisette has or did talk to Powell's wife, and she said that was he in the film. And we also have this from the ARRB when Timothy Ray interviewed Powell. During the meeting, Ray also showed Powell a videotape copy of the VZ outtakes. After several viewings of the 3 to 4 second segment showing Howard Brennan and various police officers in front of the school depository, Powell concluded that the individual shown on the extreme left of this portion holding a camera is, quote, almost certainly me, end quote. That's the way Powell told facts in his interviews. He would always qualify things he was saying. Powell was cautious about stating that the individual was him with absolute certainty, as the individual is seen mostly in profile, and the film quality is not particularly good. However, Powell noted that the hairline looks right, the clothes look right, and the camera looks right. Powell furthermore noted that he had been taking notes in a small notebook while talking to Brennan before the police arrived to take Brennan away, and the videotape seems to show the Powell figure putting something in his jacket pocket, possibly a notebook, before raising his camera. Powell indicated that he is willing to give all his original slide photographs from November 22, 1963 to the ARRB for deposit in the National Archives, as well as an original signed copy of the report he prepared for his military unit describing his activities on that date, although he never did. Powell needs to recover the slides from where they are stored in the home of his ex-wife, and then we'll send them to the ARRB. Now, if you recall, Denis Moreisette said that Powell's wife identified him in that film, and we also have Powell himself apparently identifying himself in that film. So anyway, I went back back to the conversation I had with Moreisette on the JFK Theorist comment section. I asked him, because at this time I hadn't found him in the film, I said, what's he look like? Tall, short, eyeglasses, full head of hair? How is he holding his camera? Is the wife you talked to the ex-wife who supposedly has his photos, or some other wife? And his response is, the wife who has the other photos. Now, first of all, this implies that the wife doesn't have the Powell photo we all know and love, that somebody else has that. I am not aware of anyone else having that. Now, maybe Moreisette knows something I don't there. But also, he didn't answer any of the questions except that one, which reinforces this idea that he talked to the wife, and I'm not saying he didn't, but we have it on the ARRB record that Powell himself identified himself in the film, so I'm not sure what's going on with the wife there. But anyway, the way I understand this photo situation, and maybe I'm wrong, but that Powell promised to get those photos from his ex-wife, and that he never did, and that they are not held by anybody in the public. The archives doesn't have the Powell photo, or any of them, and I don't know anything about the wife other than what Denis Moreisette says. But if Denis Moreisette talked to the wife, it seems to me that he should have, or maybe did, ask to see the photos, or suggested that she give them to the archives or something, but as far as I know, that has not been mentioned by Moreisette. But I don't know everything he said. He's around the internet quite a lot. Anyway, apparently this is supposed to be James Powell in Dealey Plaza on the day of the assassination, and I will have to consider further how this relates to what I believe, and probably eventually I'll be making a video about it. I'll probably have to remake my Powell photo video or something.